welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're looking at something pretty remarkable, a real political shockwave. And it didn't come from one of the usual suspects, a superpower or a major financial hub.
No, quite the opposite. It came from the Himalayas, of all places.
Exactly, Nepal, September 2025. The sources we've looked at describe this as, well, maybe one of the most audacious and, frankly, fast digital age revolutions we've seen.
It really was stunningly fast. This wasn't some gradual thing building over years.
Right, not a slow burn at all. It's like a 2-day sprint,
Yeah.
an almost instantaneous resistance that somehow managed to bring down a government.
And not just any government, one holding a massive two-thirds majority in parliament.
Which is huge. And it didn't just stop there. It basically dismantled 3 of the country's oldest, most established political parties, completely delegitimized them.
Yeah, the legacy parties just crumbled.
So how? Our sources really dig into how Nepal's Gen Z pulled this off. They apparently invented this unique and, well, kind of frighteningly effective new form of resistance. They called it reverse surveillance.
Reverse surveillance. It sounds almost contradictory, doesn't it?
It does. So that's our mission today, really. We need to unpack exactly what that means, how it worked, the psychology behind it.
And then compare it, right, put it side by side with other global conflicts, military actions. See how it stacks up.
Absolutely. And then look at what comes next for Nepal. Because they're considering some pretty radical blueprints for the future now. This story, I think, has lessons that go way beyond South Asia.
Oh, definitely. What makes it so extraordinary, for me anyway, is that combination you mentioned, the speed and the sheer ingenuity.
Right.
This wasn't, the result of years of careful, centralized planning by some established group. This felt like information warfare, improvised brilliantly.
By digital natives, essentially. Teenagers and young adults.
Exactly, one in less than 24 hours. And if you think about the bigger picture, what they actually did was neutralize the state's biggest advantage, its monopoly on violence.
Almost instantly.
Almost instantly. It's like they completely rewrote the rule book for asymmetric conflict. It's frankly terrifying if you're sitting in a government somewhere facing dissent.
Yeah, you have to think. All the traditional tools of state power, the tanks, the police, the big security budgets, they were just completely sidestepped.
Outmaneuvered by, like you said, teenagers with smartphones, Discord servers, and just a remarkable amount of decentralized guts.
So that's the playbook we're digging into. We're looking for those core lessons, that blueprint for you, the listener, about how power really works now.
How resistance operates in this hyper-connected digital age, especially when, physically one side seems to have all the advantages.
Okay, so we have to start, I think, with day one, because you can't really grasp the genius, maybe the desperation of the counter move without understanding the sheer brutality that came first.
You absolutely have to set that stage. The context is Prime Minister KP Oli, powerful leader, supermajority in parliament.
Right. And when these peaceful demonstrations started bubbling up protests against corruption, the usual institutional problems, his response was textbook authoritarianism.
Classic playbook. State repression. Crush dissent immediately with overwhelming force. Instill terror.
And day one, September 2025, it was just horrific. Our sources are really clear on this. The government deployed the Nepal police straight away.
Armed with live ammunition.
Live rounds, yeah. Firing, apparently indiscriminately, into crowds of peaceful demonstrators.
The goal, as the sources explicitly stated, was pure military-style shock and awe.
Make people so scared, so immediately terrified, that they just wouldn't dare come back out. Dissolve the whole movement in hours.
And the casualty figures? They tragically confirmed just how severe that strategy was.
Yeah, by nightfall on that first day, 75 people were dead.
75. And these weren't, hardened militants. These were students, civil servants, teenagers.
Just ordinary people demanding better governance, killed for protesting.
That level of immediate, overwhelming violence, it's designed to break a population's spirit. It's a signal. Resistance equals death.
And we've seen this pattern elsewhere, haven't we?
Oh, absolutely. When you connect this to the bigger picture, it's calculated. It follows precedents meant to crush movements before they gain momentum.
Like where?
Well, you see chilling echoes in how security forces cracked down during the 2021 coup in Myanmar, for instance. Massacres.
Right.
Or the suppression in Iran after Mahsa Amini's death. Or even go back to Egypt's Rabaa massacre in 2013. Hundreds killed in a day.
All calculated to make the cost of opposing the state just astronomically, terrifyingly high.
Exactly. But here's the pivot. Here's where Oli and his establishment fundamentally miscalculated.
They picked the wrong generation to try that on.
Precisely. Nepal's Gen Z. They weren't the generation that would just be intimidated into silence. The sources make a really important distinction here.
What's that?
They're digitally native, they're globally connected through the internet, and crucially, they weren't organized in the old way, not through traditional top-down political structures that you can easily decapitate by arresting the leaders.
Yeah.
They were organized using encrypted platforms, decentralized networks, like Discord, Telegram, things that are much harder for a state to monitor and disrupt from the top down.
So they saw the brutality of day one, the deaths.
They saw it, they mourned it, but they refused to retreat.
That refusal, that's the key turning point, isn't it?
It's everything. The state expected the usual script: inflict pain, population backs down in fear.
But Gen Z didn't follow the script.
No. They saw the violence not as a reason to submit, but as an urgent catalyst. They needed a new strategy immediately.
They knew they couldn't win a shooting war with the police.
Right. So they pivoted instantly. How can we neutralize the people holding the guns, using digital tools? They changed the entire battlefield overnight.
Which brings us straight to part two, that transition from fear and chaos on day one to this game-changing strategic innovation on day two. It happened literally overnight.
In a single desperate night, the realization must have been, okay, we can't stop the bullets, but maybe we can stop the people firing the bullets.
By dismantling the psychological protection they have.
Exactly. And this is where the world saw, maybe for the first time successfully implemented on this scale, reverse surveillance.
Okay, break that down. How did they actually do it? What were the mechanics?
It started with decentralized coordination, using things like Discord servers, encrypted chat apps like Telegram.
The tools they were already using to organize.
Right. And they tapped into the global Nepalese diaspora network, which is quite influential.
Okay, so what did they do with these tools?
They crowdsourced a database, rapidly compiled information identifying individual police officers.
Identifying them how? Names, badges.
Names, badge numbers, photos sometimes, but crucially, their home addresses and the addresses of their immediate families.
Wow. How did they get that information so fast? That sounds like sophisticated intelligence work.
Well, that's the amazing part. It wasn't, according to the sources, some high-level state hacking. It was community intelligence, pure crowdsourcing.
So people on the ground.
Yeah, local activists observing police patrols, noting down license plates, personnel numbers they could see, taking photos discreetly.
Yeah, the diasporal.
They helped cross-reference Nepalis living abroad, maybe with better internet access or data analysis tools, and crucially, still having strong family and social ties back home.
So they could check public records.
Exactly. Things like publicly available land records, maybe utility registries, voter rolls, sometimes even using clues from social media like geotagging or just local knowledge passed through family networks. They triangulated identities and home locations with incredible speed.
Astonishing. And once they had this database, how did they use it? Did they just publish it online?
Not quite like a single dump that could be taken down. The delivery was as decentralized as the collection. They seeded the information rapidly through the same encrypted peer-to-peer networks they use for organizing everything else, spreading it virally almost instantly through Telegram channels, private groups, making it impossible for the state to just block one website or source.
So the information got directly to the police officers themselves.
Or at least the knowledge that this information existed and was circulating spread like wildfire through the police ranks. And the message wasn't necessarily a direct threat of violence. It was more insidious, more psychologically devastating.
What was the message?
Simple, brutal, and clear. We know where you live. We know where your family lives. If you kill any more of us tomorrow, you won't have a roof over your head the day after.
Chilling. That's a masterstroke, psychologically.
It completely shifted the power dynamic, didn't it? Think about it. Authoritarian regimes, police forces engaging in repression, they rely fundamentally on the anonymity of the individual officer.
The mask, the uniform, it shields them.
Exactly. It shields them from personal consequences, from social judgment, from their own communities, from immediate retribution. Once you digitally strip away that anonymity,
the shield is gone.
Gone. The enforcer suddenly realizes their actions have direct personal consequences, not just for some abstract state policy, but for their home, their family, their standing in their own neighborhood. The state's power to compel violence just evaporates.
Yeah, you mentioned this was particularly effective in Nepal. Why there, specifically?
The sources really emphasize this point. The Nepal police, especially the rank-and-file officers, are generally not well paid.
Okay.
And crucially, they live within the very communities they were being ordered to shoot. They weren't some elite, separate Praetorian Guard living in protected barracks far away.
They were neighbors. Their kids went to the same schools.
Precisely. They were deeply embedded, so when their neighbors suddenly knew they were the ones pulling triggers, the social pressure, the fear of ostracization, or worse, it became immediate and personal.
So the fear just flipped 180 degrees.
Instantaneously inverted. Day 1. The state terrifies the protesters with death or prison. Day 2. The protesters terrify the state's enforcers with the loss of their homes, their safety, their place in the community.
The whole enforcement structure just collapsed from the inside out.
It did, because the police were suddenly facing consequences that were far more immediate and tangible than some distant court-martial or an internal investigation down the line.
And the result on day 2, was it immediate?
Incredibly immediate. By mid-morning on day 2, the sources confirm the police just stopped firing. They holstered their weapons. Some reportedly just melted away.
Wow. And the army? Did they step in?
The Nepal army hesitated. They seemed wary of turning guns on their own people, especially in a democracy, however flawed, and they must have sensed the power shift on the streets. They refused to intervene.
So the state's monopoly on violence, that iron fist Ali thought he had.
Paralyzed. Neutralized in less than 24 hours, without the protesters needing to fire a single shot back.
That's the moment the revolution was won, essentially.
That's the moment. Now, the sources do mention there was property damage that day. Police stations were attacked, vehicles overturned, some set on fire.
Right.
But this was largely seen, or at least accepted by the protesters, as a necessary, almost symbolic act. A strategic release of pressure, maybe, not indiscriminate violence.
The idea being?
The widely quoted conclusion among protesters was, better broken windows than broken bodies. Given the 75 deaths the day before, torching an empty police station seemed like the lesser evil.
Maximum political impact, minimum loss of life, achieved by tuning the cost back onto the state's infrastructure, not the people.
Exactly. A terrifyingly effective strategy.
Okay, this is where it gets, I think, even more compelling. Putting this tactic, this overnight success, into a global context.
Yeah, the comparisons the source material draws are really eye-opening. They highlight just how unique Nepal's achievement was in terms of speed and cost-effectiveness.
It really makes you question how we usually measure success or innovation in conflict. We tend to look at scale, budget.
Right. Billions spent, years of planning. Nepal suggests that maybe in asymmetric situations, ingenuity and agility can trump both time and money.
So let's look at the first comparison the sources make. Nepal versus Iran.
Okay. Iran's protest movements, think back to the huge green movement in 2009 or the widespread protests in 2022 after Mahsa Amini's death.
Incredibly brave, sustained movements, millions in the streets.
Absolutely heroic. Yet ultimately, they were brutally suppressed. Systemic change failed to materialize. Why?
Good question. Why?
The sources argue it's largely down to the anonymity and insulation of the Iranian security forces. The Basij militia, the intelligence services, they often operate without clear identification.
So protesters often don't even know who is arresting them, beating them, or worse.
Exactly. The violence is untraceable back to an individual. The enforcers are shielded by the institution. They're ghosts in the system. Accountability is almost impossible.
And that's what Nepal flipped on its head.
Completely. By creating and spreading that database of identities and addresses, they instantly attacked the anonymity shield. They did the one thing Iranian protesters, despite decades of struggle, couldn't consistently do. They unmasked the enforcers.
They removed the ghost status.
Yes. Where Iranians face the systemic helplessness in identifying their oppressors, Nepal's Gen Z improvised an immediate solution. It was like a rapid cure for that paralysis of accountability.
If you can't beat the institution, neutralize its individual actors.
That seems to be the lesson. Okay, next comparison. Nepal versus Ukraine.
Ukraine's use of drones, especially for strikes deep inside Russia, that's seen as a major innovation in modern warfare, right?
Absolutely groundbreaking. Penetrating sophisticated air defenses, hitting strategic targets, causing billions in damage, psychologically rattling a superpower.
But what did that make?
Well, the sources stress it took over a year of intense planning, development, testing. It required billions of dollars in Western military aid, R&D, complex manufacturing.
Huge logistical support, international intelligence sharing.
Right. It was a massive state-level, technologically advanced military effort. Impressive, no doubt.
But compare that to Nepal.
Nepal achieved its decisive outcome, the complete paralysis of the state's enforcement power, with virtually zero financial cost.
No Western backers, no years of planning, no military-industrial complex involved.
Just smartphones, readily available apps like Discord and community intelligence, all improvised in basically one night.
So if you measure effectiveness per dollar spent or per hour of planning,
Nepal's reverse surveillance looks almost infinitely more efficient. It suggests that tactical digital intelligence can, in some contexts, be far more powerful and faster than expensive physical destruction.
that's a different kind of warfare. Okay, final comparison. Nepal versus Israel's Mossad.
Mossad, globally renowned for sophisticated intelligence operations, covert actions, psychological warfare.
Right, like that famous operation where they reportedly hacked Hezbollah's pagers and walkie-talkies.
Exactly. Caused massive chaos in their command structure, sowed confusion and mistrust. A strategic masterstroke based on deep intelligence penetration and tech sophistication.
Again, what's the backstory to operations like that?
Years, often decades, of painstaking covert intelligence gathering, infiltration, technological development, immense resources, tens, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars per major operation.
Okay, and Nepal.
Nepal's youth achieved a functionally similar result, the disruption and paralysis of their opponent's operational network on the ground, but they did it almost overnight.
Faster, cheaper, using off-the-shelf technology, and sheer coordination.
They effectively bypassed the need for that deep, expensive state-level intelligence infrastructure entirely.
So the big takeaway here, the lesson that the sources really hammer home,
Is that preparation isn't always king. In these asymmetric conflicts, where one side has overwhelming traditional power.
adaptability, improvisation, and especially digital intelligence can be way more powerful, more decisive than logistics, budgets, or long-term planning.
It's potentially a blueprint for any underdog group facing an entrenched power. Digital agility as the great equalizer.
And that agility didn't just stop with toppling the government. It immediately flowed into thinking about what comes next,
Right.
the political overhaul.
Which is just as astonishing, really, because the collapse wasn't just about getting rid of Piamoli. It felt much bigger.
Yeah, the sources say the revolution targeted the entire political class, the whole system seen as corrupt.
That's right. Within those 48 hours, not only was Oli's supermajority gone, but all three of the major legacy parties.
Nepali Congress, the UML, United Marxist-Leninist, and the Maoists.
All of them were suddenly seen as illegitimate, toxic.
And interestingly, it wasn't because their offices were stormed or leaders arrested necessarily.
No, it was more insidious. The youth movement, using those same digital networks, successfully framed them all as part of the same corrupt establishment.
Lumping them together, highlighting their history of coalition hopping, power-sharing deals, endemic graft.
Suddenly, that shared history became an unbearable liability under the intense, unforgiving digital spotlight of Gen Z. They were all painted with the same brush.
And the consensus that emerged almost instantly.
Now, going back, the sources say it was almost a non-negotiable demand echoing across social media and the streets. The old parties are finished. They cannot return.
So the focus shifted immediately. Not just get rid of the bad guys, but build something completely new.
Exactly. Build a system that is structurally designed to prevent corruption from taking root again. And that immediate pivot from just opposition to actual structural planning, that's rare. So many movements stall after the dictator falls.
Okay, so after this political earthquake, this clean slate, what were the options? The sources lay out two main paths forward, right?
Two potential roads Nepal could take to try and consolidate this victory and actually build that new system.
Let's look at option A first. This seems like the more radical path, pushed by those demanding fundamental change, the idea of an interim revolutionary government.
Yeah, this proposal is closely associated with a figure named Umashankar Prasad from something called the Kalkism Research Center, or KRC.
Kalkism Research Center, okay?
Yeah.
And their plan isn't just vague anti-corruption slogans, is it?
Not at all. It's a detailed, highly ambitious economic and governance blueprint. It seems specifically designed to address the core demands of Gen Z, not just political freedom, but economic dignity and an end to systemic cheating.
So what are the key pillars of this KRC plan? The sources mention a cashless economy as a starting point. Why?
The thinking, according to the sources, is that cash is the lifeblood of corruption in places like Nepal. Illicit payments, bribes, hidden money, it all happens off the books, in cash.
So if you force everything digital,
If all transactions have to go through digital channels, ideally state-controlled ones, then everything leaves a trace. It makes bribery and embezzlement inherently riskier, much harder to hide. It creates transparency by default.
Okay, interesting. Then they propose state-owned banks.
Yes, alongside a policy of zero interest rates.
Zero interest rates. That sounds economically revolutionary. Or maybe impossible.
Well, it's certainly a radical rejection of standard market economics. The goal seems to be tackling predatory lending, financial speculation, and economic instability, things that really anger young people who feel locked out.
So state banks offering zero-interest loans. The idea is to direct credit towards productive things, not just making money from money.
Exactly. Ensure the government, representing the people, controls the financial levers, not private banks focused solely on profit. It's about economic stability and inclusion, putting finance in service of national goals.
And all of this radical restructuring, it leads to one ultimate promise, right?
Yep.
The thing Gen Z is really demanding.
The bottom line, guaranteed jobs within 1 to 2 years.
That's the payoff.
That's the social contract. It shows the revolution isn't just about abstract ideals. It's about delivering tangible economic security. A job guarantee is how you translate corruption-free state into something people feel in their daily lives.
Okay, that's option A. Very ambitious. What's option B? The more conventional route.
Option B is the electoral path. Trying to achieve change through elections, forming new parties, winning power that way.
But the sources warn this path is full of traps for the revolutionaries, right?
Absolutely. The big challenge is, can Gen Z translate that incredible energy and ingenuity they showed with reverse surveillance?
The speed, the decentralization, the
Oof.
digital coordination.
Can they translate that into building a functioning, funded, effective political campaign machine from scratch?
Because just being popular on the streets isn't enough to win elections against the old guard.
Not even close. Those legacy parties, Congress, UML, Maoists, even if discredited, they still have deep roots, established networks, local organizers, media connections, and crucially, money. Often access to murky funding channels.
So if the youth movement relies only on anger and online buzz,
The old elites could easily claw their way back through the ballot box using their superior organization and resources. They know how to play the traditional political game.
the sources draw a parallel here, I remember, with India's Narendra Modi.
Yes, it's an interesting point. Modi achieved massive popularity, mobilized millions. But did that popularity automatically translate into ending systemic corruption or deeply reforming institutions in India?
Arguably not, or at least not completely.
Right. So the warning is, popularity needs to be paired with genuine structural reform. Otherwise, the victory is hollow. Winning an election is just the first step. The real test is using that power to actually dismantle the corrupt structures.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, this incredible deep dive into Nepal. What are the big lessons for the rest of us, for the world? The sources seem to boil it down to a few key takeaways.
I think there are 3 really powerful ones.
Lesson 1 seems to be, anonymity is power reversative.
Absolutely. Corrupt systems, authoritarian states,
Sure.
they thrive when their agents, the police, the officials taking bribes, can act with impunity hidden behind a badge or bureaucracy.
Nepal showed that if you can strip away that anonymity, if you can use crowdsourced digital tools to expose the individuals involved,
You turn the state's surveillance apparatus back on itself. You shift the balance of fear, fundamentally. It's a potent, low-cost weapon against entrenched power.
Lesson 2, improvisation beats preparation.
Yeah, we saw that starkly in the comparisons. Forget years of planning and billion-dollar budgets sometimes.
Nepal's youth achieved a decisive win by adapting and innovating digitally, literally overnight.
It validates agility. It shows that in today's world, digital literacy and the ability to coordinate rapidly might be more valuable assets in a conflict than traditional military or financial strength.
And lesson 3, digital platforms are the new political battlefields.
Definitely. Discord, TikTok, Telegram, Signal, these aren't just social apps anymore.
They're the infrastructure for 21st century political movement.
They allow for organization, communication, and action entirely outside of state control or traditional media gatekeepers. The Nepal Revolution was born, coordinated, and won on these platforms. They provided the architecture for a truly peer-to-peer resistance.
But there's a final, maybe more sobering lesson here too, isn't there?
There is, and it's arguably the most important one for Nepal's future and for anyone watching. The sources really stress this. Toppling is easier than building.
Bringing down the old regime, however dramatic, might actually be the easy part.
Relatively speaking, yes. The real grinding challenge is what comes next. Can they maintain that revolutionary energy, that magic, and channel it into the hard work of governance?
Can they actually implement that cashless economy? Establish those zero-interest state banks, deliver those guaranteed jobs?
That kind of deep structural reform is incredibly difficult. It requires sustained focus, technical expertise, and navigating immense political and potentially international pressures. That's the true test of whether this revolution succeeds long term.
But if they do succeed, if Nepal somehow manages to build a genuinely corruption-free system based on these principles of digital transparency, economic dignity, grassroots power.
Well, then it wouldn't just be a successful revolution. It could, as the sources suggest, become the world's first truly corruption-free democracy, a functioning model for others.
A small nation teaching the world something profoundly new.
They've already shown the world how to fight back against seemingly impossible odds using digital ingenuity. They've provided a new playbook for resistance.
The next chapter, the building phase, will determine if they can turn that playbook into a lasting legacy. A blueprint not just for tearing down, but for building something better, something perhaps you can learn from and maybe even adapt.